Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans the world over, it's time once again for Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, a world renowned, world famous, world celebrated, globally recognized comic book genius. You get to ask me questions about what I do for a living. What I do for a living for my sins is write comic books. Okay, Kane Dorr asks, I'm curious about when, why you may choose for a character to die. Does it happen primarily due to the needs of the story, or maybe a better way of asking it does it happen primarily due to the needs of the genre the story you're writing is in? Kind of story that may typically come with a body count, such as Rambo or James Bond. Do you ever kill characters just because you, their benevolent creator, feel like they should die based on the actions that they take in the story? I mean, if it were me writing Levon's Home, well, I'd likely have killed off Teddy Cade. Yuck. What a piece of shit. I'm only on chapter 30, so he may still die, although so far Levon's decided to let him live. Deciding whether or not to kill characters. Sometimes you kill a character because their story's over and you don't want them in your continuity anymore, as I've discussed in previous videos. Often in stories, characters die because of their actions. They've broken some sort of moral code, violated the Ten Commandments, betrayed someone else, shown some sort of moral weakness, and therefore they must die. It's often the theme in horror films that the good girl lives to the end, and the bad girl. Same's true in Bond movies. The bad girl dies early in the film. I don't tend to write that way because it's kind of predictable. I'm not writing in a formula, or at least I'm trying not to write in a formula where characters necessarily get their comeuppance, because that's not the way it happens in the real world. As we see, you got a lot of really rotten people live to a ripe old age and are wealthy and privileged. And then we see other people who are, good, kind-hearted and everything, and they sacrifice everything for others, and yet they die young and impoverished. So particularly in the Levon Cade novels, I try to stick somewhat to reality, the way things really would be. It's hard sometimes to kill a fictional character, especially sometimes a villain. If you created a really compelling bad guy, you don't want to, you hate to knock him off, because then you got to create another one to take his place. So that's a tough one. And of course, killing characters that are beloved by the readers. Generally, if they're beloved by the readers, you sort of love them too, and it's sometimes difficult to kill them. Merely killing characters for shock value, not something that I'm into. If it makes sense within the story, if the point I'm trying to get across is some message of tragedy or whatever, if I'm trying to paint a picture closer to the real world where sometimes the good die young, then that's going to happen. But a prime example, particularly in Levon Cade novels, is the character in the later novels, Lou Dolinger. I don't want to do any spoilers here, but Lou's like really just a reprehensible creep. And yet I found him so interesting I couldn't kill him. So he continued to exist through a few more of the books. I won't tell you his ultimate fate, but at the moment where normally in a story like what I was writing he would die, I decided I would spare him. Because he had more story to tell. There was more story to tell about Lou Dolinger, and I'm glad I let him live, because he turned out to be, if not a likable character, an interesting character. Certainly not a likable guy. Okay. So on to our next question here. Tim Gilpin, I enjoyed your 1998 martial arts crossover Brotherhood of the Fist, which ran through the Bat titles and Green Arrow. What were the inspirations for the story? Also, I'm curious which editors signed off on the conclusion pitting Connor Hawke against Lady Shiva and establishing him as her peer at the top of DC's martial arts hierarchy. Um, well, I presented the idea of this crossover. I mean, the inspiration for the crossover was I was writing all of these books, and I thought, and I had set up a lot of martial arts rivalries within the titles I was writing, and I'd also created these, you know, the Brotherhood of the Monkey Fist, and its mysterious hierarchy of martial arts champions, karate killers of the Orient kind of thing. And I really wanted to tell like an epic story um, of the dissolution of this brotherhood, because they were causing problems for everybody within my corner of the DC universe, and you just don't let something like that go on and on and on. So this pestilence, I wanted to see it knocked off, and what better way than a basically a martial arts championship within the Batman universe, and it was generally agreed upon, and in fact, it was an edict from Denny that Shiva was the martial arts master of the DC universe, partly because he created her, partly because over time, through his hands and through the hands of other creators, she'd evolved in this really cool, like mysterious character, this great femme fatale. So we wanted to keep her at the top of the, empty fist, empty hand fighting food chain. But I was really promoting the fact that Connor Hawke was a martial arts master himself. He did not inherit Oliver Queen's metahuman abilities with a bow and arrow. He wasn't a natural with a bow and arrow. I didn't feel we should replace Oliver Queen as DC's master bowman, but I wanted Connor Hawke to be more into Asian martial arts, empty hand fighting, and show how adept he was, and that he was Oliver Queen's equal in that arena rather than in bow fighting. And I talked this over with Denny and the other editors, and they thought, it was a cool idea. It was a great way of elevating Connor Hawke, because the natural inclination would be it's Batman and Shiva at the top, but I didn't. Well, Batman obviously fights real good, and he's learned all these different disciplines. I didn't see him as the kind of natural master of these things that Connor or Shiva were. And and I thought it turned out pretty good. The editors enjoyed it, and I think it helped lift the sales of Green Arrow in particular. Because when you do a crossover like this, the idea is you want to basically you're informing the retailers how to order this, and so orders on Green Arrow rose because you didn't want to miss the parts of the story that were Robin, Nightwing, Detective were all top selling Batman titles. You couldn't very well order a different amount of Green Arrow and leave a bunch of your readers behind at your store. That wouldn't have gone over well, I can imagine. So anyway, those were the inspirations, and I just wanted to write a big kick-ass martial arts story, and I was pleased at how it turned out. Jack Elmy, salutations. In one of your videos, you recommend the film $1 Million Baby. Good recommendation. Upon watching it, I noticed that the character played by Morgan Freeman is seen reading a cross-gen comic. Is this just a coincidence, or is there a story behind it? And man, hold on, where am I? That was good spotting. That was excellent spotting. That's a schnauzer. That's not the picture I want. There's the picture I want. Yes, this is an amateur production. There's Morgan Freeman reading a cross-gen comic. My goodness, that's cool. I've seen this movie a couple of times. I never noticed that. No, it was not product placement or anything else. It's just a coinky-dink of some kind. So, there you go. I can't explain it to you. I don't have any more to tell you about that incident. Here, I'm trying to find my way back to where I was with these images. Okay, I'm not there. Yeah, I'm not there. Where am I? I messed this all up. Hey, here we are. Gentle Savage asks, Mr. Dixon, are you a dog person or a cat person? Which dog or cat breeds do you think are the best? I guess in current years, I'm a cat person. I mean, I've owned dogs, I've owned cats, I've owned guinea pigs, I've owned, God knows what kind, all kinds of animals. I like animals. I like pets. They're cool. And in recent years, I guess I'm a cat person because we've had cats. We only have one cat currently, and they're all cats that basically they were rescue cats. Like we ran into a burning building after them. Basically, two of the three cats we had literally followed us home, and the third, we picked up, at a shelter. But our current cat followed my wife and my son home on a late night walk a number of years ago. She was just a kitten, maybe 8 to 10 weeks old, just an itty bitty little thing, and we took her in, and she seems to like it here. But I used to have dogs, and the last dog we had was a Schnauzer, who I gave you a glimpse of just a few minutes ago. So. And awesome breed, great breed. They don't shed. They're great with kids. Lots of fun. It's basically a terrier breed, but they're not quite as spastic as a lot of terrier breeds are. And we really enjoyed having him. His name was Squire. And we don't have a dog since we moved to Florida because we live in a development. And I don't think it's fair to a dog that the only time they see the outside is when you take them for a walk. When we had Squire, we lived in Pennsylvania. We had a fenced-in yard. We had acreage. And he could go outside and run around like a maniac. And sometimes get through the fence and run all over the countryside like a maniac. But I don't think it's fair to a dog to just simply walk them. So we haven't had a dog since we moved into this development. Now we are planning eventually. We own acreage. We're planning to build there and move, and we've discussed that we might just have a dog if we have a fenced-in yard again. Because I think that's really the only thing. Dogs need to run around. They need to run around on acreage. Just walking them from one lamppost to the next, that's not enough exercise. Hey, have you subscribed? If you have, thank you. If you haven't, hit that button. It sure helps grow this channel. And check and see if you're still subscribed. I'm hearing stories about people who subscribed a year or so ago, and for some reason they're no longer subscribed. So make sure you are subscribed, because it really does help make this channel work. Okay, Sid is Warren. Man, you've posted a couple times. You gotta give me a phonetic breakdown of your last name, because I don't it's rude to mispronounce, but I don't know the derivation of it. I don't know where to begin. Anyway, since you were the long time and the best, thank you so much. You are too kind. Best writer on Nightwing, in your ideal version of DC canon, would you rather have the initial Batman-Robin split that leads to Grayson becoming Nightwing as more amicable, like in pre-crisis continuity, or a more fractured end to their partnership as in post-crisis stories and in new Batman adventures? Yeah, I don't like the fractious breakup with animosity and all the rest of it. I prefer a story where a version where there's, Dick Grayson reaches a point where he realizes he can no longer go on as Robin. There's no reason for him to go on any longer as Robin, or to go on any longer as an appendage to Batman and Bruce Wayne. That he wants to go off on his own, be his own man, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a fight or a falling out between Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson, Batman and Robin. It doesn't have to be that way. It could simply be something happens and it just becomes obvious to Dick Grayson and that I gotta go. It's time I was off on my own. So that would be my favorite way of handling it. And to tell you the truth, I'm not sure. I know I read the story where he basically decides to become Nightwing, go off on his own, but I don't remember the conditions of that. But it's such a boring thing in recent fiction in general, not just in comics, that everybody has to, there has to be like a big fight. There has to be some big dramatic moment. Yeah, I don't like that. I prefer. I mean, Batman and Robin were too much of a duo. They were too much of a partnership. There was too much mutual respect there for them to have any kind of a falling out that would lead to them separating as a crime-fighting pair. Kian Kurji, what do you think of the Hollywood? What do you think of the Hollywood blacklisting? Was there an actual communist threat from within Hollywood that could actually cause bad propaganda? Was McCarthy right? And even if he was, did he take it too far and do it all just for clout? Well, as I said in the previous video, a lot of times conspiracies aren't conspiracies, they're understandings. And a lot of the communist influence in American politics, academia, in entertainment was an understanding. In the 1920s and early 30s, a lot of American intellectuals went to the Soviet Union. They also went to Nazi Germany. They also went to fascist Italy and fascist Spain to kind of take a look around. An alarming number of these intellectuals thought, hey, this Hitler guy's onto something. Same with Mussolini. Mussolini got a lot of good press here in the United States in the 20s for what he was doing in Italy. And of course, same thing happened with all these intellectuals in the Soviet Union. And as was the case in Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy, the Soviets took these academics, these intellectuals from America, and led them around by the nose. And they took them to, model factories and model communities and model farms. And these were real kabuki theater, just perfect example. Everybody play acting at being happy and working together, And so they didn't show them the famines, the pogroms, the massacres, the gulags, the mental institutions. They didn't show them the anti-Semitism. They didn't show them all the ugly, ugly, ugly parts of the Soviet Union that would come to light later and, result in the deaths of tens of millions of people. These intellectuals didn't see any of that. They saw sort of a Disneyland version of a communist state. And they came home preaching about that to everybody. Now, the Soviet Union certainly took advantage of these little seeds they had planted and converted a number of these people to be actual Soviet agents. And by Soviet agents, I don't mean occasionally spying, saying, well, how many army trucks did you see today, comrade? No, they became agents like that was their job. Now, they may have had another job on, in the president's cabinet or at a film studio or at a newspaper or at a publishing house. That was their day job. But their real job was spying for the Soviet Union. And to the point where many of them they held rank in the NKVD, the Soviet military intelligence agency. And they were majors, they were colonels. They held rank, they had a pay book, they had rewards waiting for them when the Glorious Revolution happened. And this is all revealed in the Verona Papers, which back in that brief period between the Soviet Union falling and Putin taking over everything, that brief period where you had Boris Yeltsin and people like that cooperating with the United States, the Soviets shared a lot of their intelligence from the NKVD files and the KGB files. And we learned that a lot of these suspicions that people had on the right about communist influence in our society were true. All these people that the liberals, the anti-communists over the years have been saying, oh, he's innocent, he's not a Soviet spy. We find out, no, he was a Soviet spy. He was a top Soviet agent. He was an award-winning, medal-wearing. He wasn't just a card-carrying commie. He was a hero of the revolution. And so it's part understanding, it's part conspiracy. Now, I'm not saying that there were Soviet subs off the coast of California, offloading commies to go write and star in movies and television and the rest of it. But there was definitely a communist presence there. And now, did Joe McCarthy go too far? Yeah, Joe McCarthy was an opportunist. He was a careerist. He went too far. He was probably the worst messenger imaginable to alert the United States to the influence of communists in our academia, in our government. And a lot of what he said was true. A lot of what he said was fantasy. He just got too full of himself, and he was an easily mockable figure. And this is where the anti-communist movement within the liberal community grows out of. It's easy to make fun of McCarthy, and that's what they did. And a little bit more of that in a minute. But the ones that went after Hollywood was the House on Un-American Activities, which was before McCarthy. McCarthy had nothing to do with. House on Un-American Activities was, Richard Nixon and Bobby Kennedy. They were lawyers on this committee, and they were, along with these other, senators and congressmen, were trying to get to the bottom of, is our entertainment been influenced? Is the American public being fed, pinko propaganda without realizing it? And this led to investigations. Are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? And it also led to top talent, people like Ronald Reagan, Elia Kazan, and others coming out and saying, yeah, there's commies in our midst. There's they have meetings, and they talk about the violent overthrow of the country, and here's the list of names. And people go, oh, they were rats, they were creeps. They handed over the names of their fellow creators. No, they handed over the names of dangerous, foreign influenced agents working within our system. Because remember, a lot of the film industry was made up of immigrants from Europe who had fled primarily Nazi Germany. And a number of them were communists. So, so they got to the bottom, but the thing is, the anti-communist movement comes up to mock all of this and say, this is horrible, what they're doing, the blacklists and everything else. And, as a name that's been on, a person that's been on any number of blacklists, I don't really like blacklists, but Hollywood was trying to do what it could to save its own reputation, because Hollywood, they did not want the government up their butt telling them what to do all the time. So they kind of had to clean house a little bit. They had to cooperate. Much like today, when Hollywood bows to the woke and bows to the far left, it's just to save their ass. They don't believe in any of that stuff, but they've got to do it. They feel like they have to do it in order to make themselves whole, to atone for whatever original sin they might have created. And back then, the majority of the studio heads were conservative. They were politically very, very conservative men. And so, hey, kick the commies out? No problem. But the anti-communists were able to turn this into a thing like Kaiser Soze. It was like, ha, 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 you're seeing communists everywhere. You're seeing communists under the bed. That was a common joke, on, people like Richard Nixon and Robert Kennedy and Roy Cohn and Joe McCarthy and the chairs of the House on Un-American Activities. And, if you remember Usual Suspects, Kaiser Soze's thing was, the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing everybody he didn't exist. And so the anti-communists, their whole thing was, there's no communist conspiracy, blah, blah. And of course the communists helped, spread that into the zeitgeist. So that if you were to start talking about communists, you were immediately labeled a kook. There are no communists. There is no monster in the closet. But unfortunately there was. The closet was full of monsters. But you weren't allowed to say it because people would make fun of you. My favorite story about the blacklist was there was a group of writers, 10 writers, called the Uncooperative 10. And they were 10 Hollywood screenwriters who would not cooperate with the House on Un-American Activities. And the great screenwriter, director, Billy Wilder, was asked about them. He says, what do you think about the Uncooperative 10? And Billy Wilder said, well, one of them is talented. The rest are just uncooperative. Okay, Ivan Magila. What are your top 5 contemporary westerns? As contemporary, I mean westerns made in the 1990s until present day. Well, number 1 would be Tombstone. You gave me your own list, Yvonne, and you apparently didn't have that high an opinion of this movie, but you included it on your top 5. I have a very high opinion of this movie. This is an awesome western. It's the best retelling of the Wyatt Earp legend I've ever seen, and I've seen a whole bunch of them. I mean, just about every male actor in Hollywood at one time or another had played Wyatt Earp. Burt Lancaster, Joel McCrea. More recently Kevin Costner, Hugh O'Brien, blah blah blah. It goes on and on and on. But yeah, this is a terrific retelling. It's a western. It's got it all. It's got the gunfights. It's got the amazing epic western imagery, and it's just one of my favorites. I rewatched this one quite a bit. Unforgiven is a classic. It's Clint Eastwood's last western. Just an amazing screenplay, and Clint really just brings that screenplay to life, to perfection. The performances, all the rest of it. A lot of people refer to this as a revisionist western. It's not a revisionist western. If this is a revisionist western, then the western's been being revised for over 100 years. Go back to, if you can find it, 1916 silent western Hell's Hinges. And if you remade that today, they'd be calling it a revisionist western. So the western is more grown up, more nuanced than a lot of critics or people who write about film ever give it credit for. Unforgiven would have fit right in the 50s. It could have been an Anthony Mann movie. Clint Eastwood understands this. He understands what a classic western is. This could have been a Randolph Scott or Jimmy Stewart western. It's got all the bells and whistles, all the quote unquote adult, mature aspects of a great grown up western, and absolute classic movie. Another one is Open Range. Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall as drovers who get mixed up with a really seedy, vile gang of criminals in a town way out in the middle of Wyoming. It's Costner produced, and apparently put up his own money, built his own western town, built a brand new western town we'd never seen before. And it's a good one, man. It really pays off. The climactic extended shootout is terrific. Broken Trail, also with Robert Duvall and Thomas Hayden Church, is I don't know. It's kind of forgotten these days. This was a movie made for AMC and got huge ratings. It was number 1 in the ratings when it premiered. It beat broadcasting ratings at the time, back when broadcasting ratings were something. It got Sopranos type ratings, which made me wonder, why don't they just keep making these? They should have made 6 of these movies a year, but they didn't. But it's a really good action western, as well as kind of historical adventure, as Robert Duvall and Thomas Hayden Church take it upon themselves to be sort of guardian angels to a group of Chinese immigrant women. But it's a goodie. It's a good one. The Salvation, Mads Mikkelsen, and I think Mikael Persbrandt, 2 of my favorite Danish actors. Actually, the only 2 Danish actors whose names I know, in a Danish production shot in the United States. It's a terrific revenge western. Really good. I get a little tired of revenge westerns because they're formulaic, but this one's got everything, and it is a goodie if you've never seen it. The Salvation, Mads Mikkelsen. Jonathan Haley Tang. Why does it seem like DC hates characters from the 90s? Cassandra Cain, Tim Drake, Kyle Rayner, Bart Allen, Connor Hawke, John Henry Irons, Jean-Paul Ali, Jack Knight, Connor Kent. All of them were killed off, replaced, or written out of DCU at some point. Were they unpopular with fans, or just unpopular with a select group of writers at DC? Well, I mean, why would you want to keep those characters around? they were only emblematic of the last time that DC Comics made a profit off of comics. They were just, symbols, unwanted symbols of a period in which DC was an actual going publishing concern, publishing comics that people actually wanted to read. For whatever reason, the people running DC that have been running DC for a couple of decades now just don't seem to want to get serious about capitalism. They don't seem to want to create anything that anybody gives a damn about, with a few exceptions. There's a few people still doing cool stuff at DC, but the majority, and I saw this before I left DC, the sort of house attitude toward publishing was, we're just here for our careers. It doesn't matter if the things sell or not. It's what really matters is I scored points at the editorial meeting, for whatever reason, and these reasons never ever translated into sales. So yeah, I mean, it's like, we're not going to do that cool stuff that people liked anymore. We're going to come up with brand new stuff, and they're going to love this just as much. But they didn't. And then when they didn't, they were like, well, we'll just trash all that and come up with some other cool stuff people will like. And they did that over and over and over again, rinse and repeat. And it never worked, and it still hasn't worked. And why don't they give up? Why don't they go away and let some grown-ups come and bring DC back to its former glory? It wouldn't be that hard. It really wouldn't be that hard. There's a lot of talented people out there. If you were to say, look, come on over to DC, you write and draw Superman, you write and draw Batman, you write and draw Flash, just go crazy. And I guarantee you, the company could come back. But that ain't going to happen because, the same chuckleheads are in charge now that have been in charge for quite a while. Rich Ware, can you describe your processes when plotting a story and then scripting? And do you use the same process for writing your novels versus writing a comic script? Yeah, I basically start in the same place, either a high concept or, more generally, a high concept that leads to pictures in my head of like big scenes. What would the big scene be? And then I've got to create a story that justifies those big scenes. I've got to populate the story with characters that the reader cares about. I've got to, come up with, what happens in the story, the pacing, the rest of it. And I don't write outlines largely. On a couple of the novels, I've never done this on comics, but in a couple of novels, I've written chapter breakdowns. And after like 3 chapters, I've abandoned it. And I'm all, because I came up with other ideas. A lot of it is just organic. In comics, it's like, okay, I got my big scene or my 2 or 3 big scenes. I just finished a project 120 pages long, and I had like 6 really big scenes I wanted to do. And it was just a matter of tying them all together. And once I figured out my opening on a comic, I just start writing. And I just go from there. And I know generally where I'm going. I know the big climactic scene I want to get to. And then it's just a matter of getting to that. In novels, it's different. It's weird because stuff will come to me as I'm writing it. And, like better ideas of how to get to my big scenes, better ideas of how to get to the climax or the dramatic high points of the story. And I'll come up with like different scenes that I hadn't conceived of before, to make it interesting, to either, advance the plot, but you never want to write just to advance the plot. You see that in movies all the time where something ridiculous will happen because, well, the story has to go on, or they'll just ignore things that they should have paid attention to, or they make things that should have been difficult very easy, or they have the characters do something stupid because all of these things will help advance the plot. Never just advance the plot. Of course, you have to advance the plot, but don't exclusively advance the plot. Every scene, whether it's a comic or a prose or a movie or whatever, to my mind, has to serve 2 purposes. Now, what those 2 purposes are doesn't matter. Obviously every scene advances the plot, or should. in genre fiction. If you're writing literature, no, that's not the case. But of course, if you're writing literature, you're a pretentious a-hole, and you're not listening to this anyway. So so every scene you advance the plot, but you advance the plot and it's something funny, or you advance the plot and it's building character, or you advance the plot and it's presenting a mystery, or you advance the plot and something happens to deconstruct the plot and turn the plot back in on itself. So there's all kinds of things to consider, and I can't do any of that in outline. Outlines are dead to me. And the other aspect is probably immature of me, but I'm a writer, so I'm allowed to be immature. If I write a detailed outline, I don't feel like writing a novel anymore. I've told the story. That's why I never talk about my stories before I write them, because it's like, once I told the story, it's like, well, now all the fun's gone. I already told it. I don't want to have to tell it again. And I don't want to have to follow this thing I've written. And I found, for whatever reason, I've intuited storytelling. I understand the language of storytelling somehow over years of reading and whatever else I've done, and reading analysis and reading criticism. So I've intuited this stuff to the point where I don't know how I do it. I just do it. And, as long as you people like it, I mean, obviously I could do it that way and everybody goes, you suck. I didn't care about your characters. I didn't care what came next. Your story was stupid. No, I guess my intuitions were wrong. But since I've been doing this for a really long time and have had some degree of success, not 100% of the time, but some degree of success, my intuitions must be on the money for what people want to read, or what a certain part of the reading population want to read. What you want to read, you're listening to me. I just assume you've read my stuff. Anyway, that was a long story made longer. Should have gotten to my big scene quicker. Eric Marin, do you like the 1960s Turok Son of Stone? Would you ever be willing to do something with the character? On a side note, Native American mythology and mysticism seems to be a deep well for stories. Why do you think nobody's doing anything with it? Marvel and DC both have great Native American characters. Turok Son of Stone, for those of you who don't know it, it's a sort of high concept story about Turok and his son. They're Native Americans, and they find themselves in a primordial world of dinosaurs, having to survive. And this was great fodder for kids. I mean, who could resist covers like this? And this was back in, the horrible racist days when kids loved Indians. Kids thought Indians were like the coolest thing going. There were lots and lots of comic books featuring Native American characters in the lead because we all thought Indians were cool. And, we admired their courage and tenacity, and, they were just, badasses. And I guess we were, kind of racist for that. I don't know. Is that how that works? And we liked the stories not only about Indians, but set in the world of Indians, right? It wasn't stories recast with Indians. It was actually their stories. And there were literally comic books called Indian Chief, and White Eagle, and Arrowhead, and we had Turok, and we had, it was a thing. And it seems to be completely forgotten now. And yes, there are lots of stories that we could tell about the Native Americans, without any white people in them. But whenever they want to tell stories about Native Americans in this country, it's always got to be them as victims. Same with every other minority. It's always their victims. The white people are the bad guys. And it's the same story over and over and over again. And yes, were Indians victimized? Yes. Are they victimized to this day? Yes, they are marginalized in our society, quite unfairly. And horrible things happen to the Indians. But let's be fair, the Indians did some horrible things too. And you know why that is? Because things back then were horrible. People were awful to each other. But there were long periods of peace between whites and Indians in our history. People tend to forget this. It wasn't constant conflict between white settlers, frontiersmen, and the tribes. And yes, there are so many stories. I mean, this is this rich panoply of stories of all the different tribes and their mythologies and their wars, and because these were people. These were people. Now, the last time I think that I can remember that anybody made a story about Native Americans or indigenous people, as we like to say now, that didn't have any white people in it, was Apocalypto. And Apocalypto wasn't in English. It wasn't in any language that anyone could understand. And it's an incredible movie, and it was a huge hit. Everybody said when Mel Gibson wanted to make this movie, "You're crazy, you're nuts. Nobody's going to want to go see a movie with an unknown cast about a bunch of Mayans getting in trouble in the jungle in their own language." But they did. This movie was an enormous success, especially compared to what it cost to make it. And you got to wonder, why didn't they make more of these? Well, because Hollywood is populated by idiots for the most part. The money people, they don't love movies. They just like laundering cash. And so, race swapping to them is like, that's what we should do. My problem with that is you're demeaning the people that you think you're trying to help. When you make an all-black remake of Pride and Prejudice, you're telling black people, you don't have enough culture. You got to borrow ours. You don't have enough culture. Sub-Saharan Africa, there aren't some kick-ass stories to be told in Sub-Saharan Africa. And I've related before that I spoke a while back to an Egyptian producer who was raising money to tell the stories of Sub-Saharan Africa. There's epic stuff. Same for, Native American culture. I mean, we see all these great movies out of Asia. We see movies out of India. We see movies out of China. We're starting to see movies out of Mongolia and Thailand. They don't feel a need to have any white people in them. They don't feel a need to retell a Shakespeare story with a cast of locals. They're telling their own stories. They're telling their own mythology. And why doesn't Hollywood see this? Because, especially now with audiences begging, they are begging for something different. Not another sequel, not another reboot, not another remake, not another prequel. Bring us something frickin' different. Well, this would be it. And with the success of Apocalypto and the enormous success of, things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, obviously there's an audience for this stuff. We want to see this stuff, but they won't let us see it because they think they know better. And anyway, to answer your first question, yeah, I'd write a Terrar comic. Yeah, that'd be cool. I could dig that. Matt Webster, if you could only write stories for one character for the rest of your life, who are you picking and why? I couldn't pick one character. I really couldn't pick one character. But my dream, my retirement plan is to just write Westerns for the rest of my life. To reach a point where I can just say, okay, I'm out. I'm not doing comics. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. My obligations are all met. And I'm just going to spend my remaining days cranking out Westerns. And that would be my dream. Not a single character, but a single genre. So anyway, that's it for this week. Thanks for liking, subscribing. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I hope to see every single one of you down the road. And thanks for the questions. They were awesome this week. They're awesome every week. You people are fantastic. Thank you.